Thank you for allowing me to be here this morning. This is truly a privilege for me. One, because I'm kind of a second string. I don't know if you heard about this or not, but they called and asked for the president of the university, and he couldn't make it, so you get me. I am in charge of what I do at Judson is I'm in pastoral relations, and it is a ministry of Judson University that I go out and I try to encourage and help pastors in their churches wherever they might be. I provide educational opportunities. I provide support and encouragement to them. Because think about it, those in the congregation always go to the pastor to talk to, but who does the pastor go and talk to? Well, that's what I'm trying to do. As the Great Rivers region has been without area ministers for a couple of years, I think they are working on getting that, figuring that out, and trying to bring that back. But until then, Judson felt like this was a great opportunity for them to minister to as many pastors as we can. And the other thing I would thank you for is for this church's fantastic support to Judson over many years. You have provided great support, and we thank you. And I don't mean that just by financial support, because I know there have been some of you men who have been American Baptist men have gone from here and gone to Judson to work on some of the projects from time to time. And so, Judson, I just want to say thank you to First Baptist Church Peoria for your help and your support to Judson University. And it is a privilege for me to be here today. Well, let me get going here into God's Word and what I feel like God is wanting me to say here this morning. And I want to start by asking this question. Has there ever been a time in your life when someone has done you wrong? Just raise your hand. If somebody has done you wrong in your life, maybe lied to you, they cheated you, maybe they harmed you physically, they tried to hurt your reputation, maybe broken your trust in your relationship, raise your hand, come on. Yeah, we've all done it. We've all been there. And any number of you could come up here and give a story and talk about what happened and how you were hurt. Now, no hands on this, but how many of you still hold a grudge about one or two or maybe more of those? Many of us do that. In fact, some of you might be even going through your head right now, and God is already beginning to place an instance or an issue or a person or people into your head that you're saying, oh yeah, and you're starting to replay that whole thing. And now, let me ask a question here. How many of you have never held a grudge in your life? I'm glad to see there are no liars here today. Because if you held up your hand, you'd been lying. Because we like holding on to those grudges. We like that resentment that comes along with holding on to that grudge. We like the taste of resentment. In fact, that's what resentment actually means. Resentment means turning it over and over in your mind. It's kind of like a rotisserie. Did we get that slide up? Did I get that slide up? Did I put that in there? Yeah, okay. That's what resentment means, is turning it over and over in your mind. Taking that grudge and just turning it over and over and over. Just like you have a nice rotisserie on the grill or in your oven. It starts to smell good and your mouth waters. All those juices of anger and pain continues to simmer inside our hearts and our minds, and we turn it over and over again, and we're like, yeah, I remember what they did. Except with unforgiveness, the taste is good only to yourself. To everyone else, it's bitter. It causes poisons and problems to spread to those around us. And many times we don't even know it. We ourselves, we see nothing wrong. Let me tell you a story about to illustrate that here. I want you to imagine that these two chairs bench. Okay? So use your imagination. Park bench. This park bench is actually sitting in front of a convenience store. Whatever convenience store you want to make, that's fine. Imagine that there's this guy. He's been jogging along with his dog, and he's coming up. He's really thirsty. And so he's going to stop and go into the convenience store and get something to drink. But he can't take his dog. You know, this is a nice dog. I mean, this is a man's dog. All right? I mean, this isn't some little chihuahua type thing. I mean, this is a dog, okay? All right? But he can't take the dog in because, I mean, the dog will sniff and maybe eat some of the stuff that's down on the floor shelf. So what the guy does is he comes in and he takes the leash and he ties the leash to the park bench. And then he goes in to get some water. While he's in there, we don't know why. It could be another dog. It could be a cat. It could be a squirrel. We don't know. But the dog takes off. Well, like I said, this is a good-sized dog. The dog, small bolts on here to keep it from, walking away by itself. But the dog doesn't know that. And when the dog takes off, the park bench goes with it. So when the dog's running down, and pretty soon the dog doesn't realize what's going on because all the dog knows is that there's this park bench, running behind him. And the park bench is bouncing and twisting around and sparks are flying all over the place, right? And it gets down to this intersection. And at this intersection, there's this really nice Cadillac SUV Escalade making a turn in front of the dog. The dog sees the Escalade, puts on the brakes, and stops. The park bench does not have any brakes, crashes into the SUV, knocks the mirror off, glass is going every place. Well, that scares the dog. So the dog goes into another direction, into the intersection, where there is a Volkswagen Beetle. And the dog goes in front of the Beetle, and the Volkswagen stops, but the park bench gets lodged into the bumper of the Volkswagen Beetle. And there's this dog. But the dog is oblivious to all of the crashes that's going on, the horns that are honking, and the people that are screaming. You can imagine all those things that are going on with that, and probably a few words that we can't talk about in here. I want you to understand, I want you to picture that when it comes to forgiveness, when we hold on to those grudges, those anger, and that resentment, the unforgiveness, what we don't realize is that we are dragging this stuff around with us, causing damage to other relationships, to ourselves, and it's all also holding us back from being the potential that God wants us to do. The potential He has for us. And the longer that we hold on to that grudge, in fact, it's the grudge that has a hold of us. And what I want us to see today is that the person that the grudge is hurting the most, this person that this grudge is hurting the most, isn't the other person that hurt us. It's not the one that hurt you. The person holding the grudge is the one who's actually tied or holding on to the grudge, and that's you. By holding that grudge, you are held back from what God has in store for you. If you have your Bibles, I invite you to turn to Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18. I understand you got the New Revised Standard Version, so we're going to read from there. Now, Matthew chapter 18 is dealing with, many of you probably know about how it deals with conflict in the church, things that are going on. And in verse 15, Jesus begins to deal on all that kind of stuff. But then in verse 21 is where I want us to kind of start at. Peter, as we learned in the children's sermon this morning, Peter, because he's hearing about Jesus talking about this stuff, another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? And Jesus said to him, no, not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times. You see, the problem here was that Peter was making a wrong assumption. Peter was thinking forgiveness is more for the one, it's for that one who has done the offense. In fact, a lot of us think forgiveness is more for the person who hurt us. But no. Forgiveness is more for us. That's what forgiveness is for. Forgiveness is for us. It helps us more than the person who hurt us. But Peter didn't quite get that. And many of us don't always either. So Jesus, he's talking with Peter, he's telling him that, Peter's asking 7 times. You know why he asks not 7 times? It's because the rabbis taught that if you were a very righteous man, you should forgive 3 times. A very righteous man forgives 3 times. And Peter is sitting there saying, okay, I'm going to double that. And I'm even going to add one for extra measure and say, Jesus, how about 7 times? And Jesus says, no. It's 70 times 7. We're supposed to have an attitude of constant forgiveness. Forgiving so much that we lose track of how many times. But as I said, Peter didn't really understand that. He didn't quite get it, and many times we don't either. So he goes on, and Jesus gives us this great parable that we can read in verses 23 through 27. So if you're with me, you can follow along. Verse 23. These are the words of Jesus, and he says, "For this reason the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he began the reckoning, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. And as he could not pay, his Lord ordered him to be sold together with his wife and children and all of his possessions, and payment to be made. So the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, 'Have patience with me. I will repay you everything.' And out of pity for him, the Lord of that slave released him and forgave him his debt." Now let's just recapture here. We have a king, very wealthy king. Tax time is coming. We all understand that. Tax time is coming. And he's trying to get all his books in order. And the king, as he was going through all of his records, he found a servant that owed him approximately $5 million in today's standards. $5 million. That was more than this servant could ever hope to repay. But here in biblical times, there's no chapter 11, there's no chapter 13. What are the options? Well, the king basically had a couple of options. One, he could have thrown him into jail. That's what this is. That's what this is representing. This is a jail door, okay? So he could throw him into jail until he repays. Or he could take the servant and his whole family, put them on an auction block, sell them all into slavery, and whatever money comes in, that's what he would use to help repay or recoup some of his money that this servant owed. Yet, for some reason, the king chooses a third option. The king lets him off the hook. He cancels the debt. He forgives the entire $5 million debt. Can you imagine owing the federal government or maybe a shrewd businessman here locally or maybe one of the banks $5 million and they just come up and say, don't worry about it. I don't know if anybody's going to do that. Yet, that's exactly what this king does in the story. Complete forgiveness. Now, that's another little sermon in itself, right? About how God completely forgives us more than what we could ever do. And that's another sermon So let's go on and talk about this forgiveness stuff. The story doesn't end there, because in verses 28, let's pick it up in verse 28. It says, "But that same slave, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him by the throat, he said, 'Pay what you owe.' And his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, 'Have patience with me, I will repay you.' But he refused. Then he went and threw him into prison until he could pay the debt. When his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their lord all that had taken place. And the Lord then summoned him and said to him, 'You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you?' And in anger the Lord handed him over to be tortured until he would repay his entire debt." So let's kind of recap again here, okay? The servant who's just been forgiven $5 million. He's walking along and he sees another servant who owes him approximately $100 in today's equivalent. $100. And the servant says, "You gotta pay me back." He says, "I can't." And he starts choking him. "Yeah, you're gonna pay me that $100. But since the guy can't pay him back, the first servant, he throws him in jail. Now, he's just been forgiven $5 million. And he's trying to choke his way into getting $100. Well, when the king finds out in verse 32, he calls the servant, and after scolding him, the king throws him into jail. Now, let's look at verse 35. Verse 35 says, "So my heavenly Father will also do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother or sister from your heart." Ooh, wait a minute. Whoa. We're going to be in jail. He's saying, if you do not forgive, it's going to be like you are going to be thrown into jail. It's going to be like you're living in a jail, in a dungeon. You're going to be living there. It's like your life is going to be so depressing. It's going to be so down and dark. It's like you are in a jail. And we put ourselves there because we have that resentment, that grudge that we're holding on to. Here's another way of illustrating this. I don't know how many of you like the cartoon, or have ever read the cartoon Rose is Rose. You like that one? Some of you like that? Yeah. Well, here's a cartoon that, and I'm going to read it for you. But up at the upper right, you can see Rose. She's in her dungeon, ball and chain, and she is there. The second line on the left, she's talking to herself, and she says, "Sometimes, without warning," and I can say that's because we don't forgive, okay? "I slip into my dungeon of resentment. These thick, cold walls isolate me from any possibility of joy and happiness." She's just depressed. It's down. And then you can see the next two small frames. It's your kitty cat, or cat. Peekaboo is the name of the cat. And Peekaboo is coming through. And so Rose says, "Move along, Peekaboo. Move along. I won't be very good company right now." So the Peekaboo begins to purr and rub. And Rose says at the bottom left, "And what exactly do you think you're doing? Your feeble attempts at affection will not sway me." But then the cat does the little nose rub like the cats do. And the last frame on the bottom right, it's Rose saying, "Your irresistible nose nuzzle freed me from a dismal day of self-pity." And the cat is saying in a balloon, "If I could work the still be down there. But that's what our lives are like. When we have this unforgiveness that we're holding on to, this grudge that we're holding on to, it's like there are times in our lives when we are just depressed. We are in our own little dungeons. We're in our own little jails. And if we go back to what Peter said in verse 22, Jesus is saying, in essence, I tell you not 7 times, but 70 times 7. In other words, we are to be what? Continually forgiving. Forgiving so many times that you forget count. Forgiving should be a lifestyle of what we do. How you and I live our lives. We need to be continually forgiving. Even though some of these grudges we haven't thought about in years. Some of you right now are going, well, Pastor Rex, you just don't realize what's happened to me. You don't understand the whole story. Because you see, that person, what they did to me, to forgive them, it would be like to minimize what they did to me. I'm not going to let them off the hook that easy. I'm okay. They are going to suffer. However, God tells us to cancel the debt and forgive them. Because you see, they are not doing the suffering. When we forgive, we are not minimizing the debt or the damage that has been done. Instead, we are freeing ourselves up. We are giving ourselves something that money cannot buy. We are giving ourselves the freedom to walk out of that prison door and live our lives as God intends us to do, with joy and happiness. And some of you are going, yeah, that sounds right. Good theology, Pastor. And others are saying, wait a minute, that means I have to forgive so-and-so. And God has already placed somebody in your head, in your mind. You're running into some obstacles right now. Because right now, that person, and it's kind of hard to actually forgive. And I'm going to give you 4 obstacles that I'm aware of. There are probably others. But at least 4 obstacles that we have. One is rationalization. We tell ourselves, rationalize, like, what they did to me was no big deal. I'm just going to brush it under the rug and we'll forget it. Things like, my parent was an alcoholic and it didn't affect me. Or, everything is just fine in my life. Everything is fine. I'm okay. Please understand, just pushing it under the rug doesn't help. I know. I did that. During my master's program at Northern Seminary, there was a thing called in order to graduate, you had to do these certain things and write a certain paper. And these professors, I don't know if they misread it or something, I'm not sure exactly what it was, but I had to rewrite that thing 3 times. Now, everybody else in the class was fine, but I was holding a grudge on them. But I didn't realize I was holding a grudge. I just had swept it under the rug until I actually started to work with my doctoral program. And when I started working with my doctoral program, I sent my stuff in, my initial stuff, and one of the professors actually sent back some good criticism. Only I didn't see it as good criticism because I was still holding that grudge and I didn't even realize it. And I'm sitting there going, and I emailed this guy back, who are you? What are you doing? And I hit send, and it's one of those times when you hit send, and it's like, what did I just do? And I went, a week later, I was at the seminary, and I went to the professor, and I'm sorry, I don't even know why I did this. This doesn't make sense. This is not me. He accepted my apology. We worked it out. I said, I'm going to go find out. And forgiveness issues. This guy, he didn't do anything. He wasn't even there. Well, you've got some kind of forgiveness issues. And I'm sitting there going, okay. And so I walked out of that counseling session, and I'm thinking, that guy's a quack. He didn't know what he's talking about. But God began to work. And within a week's time, God showed me that I was still holding on to that grudge from that master's program. I had not forgiven those professors for what I felt like they had done to me. I had not forgiven. I had been holding this grudge for almost 12 years. And I lashed out at this professor. Don't do that. Don't hold it for 12 years. Don't rationalize and say, yeah, it's okay. Nothing's bothering me. I'll just... No. If God is telling you something, then somebody right here, right now, you need to do some forgiveness. Another obstacle we have is revenge. Ooh, yeah. This is probably our favorite one, isn't it? I'm going to get you back. You hurt me, I am going to hurt you. I'm going to get you back. I don't know if you know about Romans chapter 12, verse 19. But it says, revenge is mine, says the Lord. That's the King James Version. That's what I memorized it as. And in college, we would always joke and say, yeah, revenge is mine. Because we didn't want to do that. We still wanted to get our revenge. And many of us still today, we want to get our revenge on that person. Please understand. Go back and read Romans 12:19. Because it says, it's not our responsibility to get revenge. It is our responsibility to forgive. God is going to take care of the revenge. We may never know when or where or what happens, but it is not our responsibility for revenge, because it's God's. Our responsibility is to forgive. So if you're holding back and you're thinking you're going to get them back, you got to really forgive. Another obstacle might be a lack of humility in our lives. We need to humble ourselves. We say, hey, if you think I'm going to admit that I was wrong by that person that messed me over, no, you're wrong. It didn't bother me. If I forgive them, they're going to think less of me. But I'm up here, I'm up here, and they're down here. No. I'm better than they are. I have to lower myself to their level, when in reality, when we forgive, we are in the strongest, greatest position of strength and influence. When we say, debt canceled, I forgive. Remember the story in Matthew that Jesus told? Who had the most power and control? It was the king. And the servant could have had that as well, if he would have done. Probably tell me I should wind up and get close. Is that what that bell is? Is that my cue? I'm sorry. One more. We get rationalization, revenge, lack of humility, and the fourth one is protecting ourselves, because it's unnatural for us. You're saying to yourself, I'm just going to protect myself. And a lot of you are breaking out maybe into a cold sweat just thinking about having to do this forgiveness work that needs to be done in your life. I know. Unleashing forgiveness is unnatural. However, God still wants us to release us from those prisons. The dungeons of our own making. He wants us to discover the freedom and the joy that comes from forgiving others. And once you've done it, once you do it once, God's going to show you all these other times and opportunities to forgive. Shortly after I did that whole thing with forgiveness with the seminary, I'm writing my notes he sees it, he pulls back in, and he stops his car in the middle of the road. Okay, I have no other option except to stop, right? So I'm stopping, I'm parking behind him. He gets out of the car, he's talking on his cell phone, and says, I'll have to get back to you. Click, and he comes back to me, and he starts talking to me in all kinds of words and things, again, that I can't say here. Who are you? What gives you the right? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm just sitting there taking it. I'm waiting for my turn. You know, I'm waiting. Okay, I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. He finally slows down, and I say, what gives me the right is that I live in this community, because it was this area where I live. And I'm saying, I live, and I care about all these people in here. Now, I don't know if it were those words that I said, or the fact that on the back of my helmet, it says, Pastor.